My name is Joshua Reaves. I am the program director here at University Theater, and tonight we have a new guest and a co-host, undergrad alum and current grad student, Darby Madewell. Darby, thank you for joining us tonight. And Darby will be co-hosting as we interview Miss PORSCHE McGOVERN, a lighting designer and researcher. This should be easy, but probably not. Tell us what a lighting designer is. What does that role mean to you?
I mean, I'm going to say in theater, right? Because I haven't worked in any of the other lighting design.
Theater,
Right. In theater, I think the role of the lighting designer is to shape the world presented by the play in the most appropriate way possible.
That was concise. Nice. Great.
Awesome. So with that, what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, let's do during pandemic, because this has been a fun time. So I get up at 5:30, so I have an hour of time to do stuff on the study, which is my research, before my daughter gets up. And now we have remote school. So I spend, because she's only going to be in second grade this coming year, I spend the hours of 8:30 to 3, more or less next to her, trying to help her navigate all the various school programs, while trying to sneak in work on the study and emails at the same time. And then we hit 3 o'clock. She's done at that point. So yay, Octonauts, right? She goes and watches television. I try to get more work done. I feel like I'm always in a meeting every day. I'm not sure how that happened, because I thought I was unemployed. But I keep being in meetings every day. And then in the evenings, if it is Wednesday, I am sometimes facilitating conversations for the stage manager events. If it is not Wednesday, I am making dinner, chores. Did I mention more chores? Because we were all eating all 3 meals every day here in the home. And then I try to get my daughter to go to sleep for at least an hour. That takes a while. I try to squeeze in a little TV time in there, right, where I'm like, ooh, new episode of Pioneer Woman. I like to cook. No, I don't like to cook. I like to bake, but I make sure I cook so we all survive. Let's be clear. And then, I don't know, I fall asleep if I'm lucky at 10, and lately with insomnia, more like midnight.
I get that. Yeah, I totally get the whole parenting and working while not really working. Like that, it feels right. It feels like home to me right now. So speaking of, being a mother in this world, can you speak a bit about what it's like to be a mother while designing, even if it was, pre-COVID or post-COVID? Like, what's it like to be a parent and working in the theater?
I mean, it's evolved over the years, right? It was a very different situation when she was a baby. It was a very different preschool, right? And then when she's been in school full time, it was another big shift, right? Of who takes those phone calls from the school about your kid and another kid tried to chest bump each other, and she's teeny, so she went flying, right? Who takes that call? I take that call. I tell all my theaters up front that, like, if the name on this phone is the name of my child's school, I'll be walking out of the room. I know we're in tech. I know we have things to do. I'm still walking out, right? Like, you'll see me do it. I have to take off a headset, right? I have to finagle my way off a butt board. It's not going to be subtle, right? This is not a subtle moment of like, no, I'm getting up now. And yeah, all of my theaters actually have always been like, yeah. And I'm like, great. And then I'll come back in whenever, right? When we figured out whatever is happening. When she was little, it was a lot more like she would come to visit the theater a lot more often, right? Because I could just put her in the little carrier and be like, okay, you sit there while mommy writes cues, right? Like, you can just sit there. Oh, you're sleeping. Great. I can talk on headset now. But now that she's bigger, right? I know lots of parents do it, but I can't do it, right? Like, I would never be able to pay attention to the show and her enough in either direction to get what I need to do done. But she still will come visit every now and again, 2 preview days, she'll visit at dinner. A lot. It's a lot.
I want to highlight this quote that we found from you about how becoming a mother inspired your research, and also about being a new mother while designing. Breastfeeding in theaters was always an adventure. I was literally pumping at the tech table and making cues or doing assistant work. It made the people around me really uncomfortable.
And not everybody, I want noted. Like, the people who I thought it would make uncomfortable, right, actually were like, we don't care, right? And then what's really funny is this week on Facebook, someone was like, I have to tell my favorite story about Porsche as a lighting designer. We were in an alley configuration, and I got up because I heard this strange sound in the sound system, and I walked all around the space, and she's looking at me like, I don't know what you're doing, right? Like, what are you doing? And then I walk by her, and I'm like, there's no speaker here, there's no monitor here. And she goes, it's just my breast pump, fam. Is that what you were looking for? I could have told you that minutes ago while you were pacing around the room.
So, Portia, what got you interested in lighting design? How did you get your start? And as you speak, I'm going to throw some images up of some of your work. So if you see something you want to speak about, or, but really we're interested in hearing why lighting design.
Why lighting design? Because when I went to college, I got the choice that I could do lighting design work study for money, or I could do stage management for course credit. And I had plenty of course credit. But I needed money. So I chose electrics, right? And then I kept trying to leave, right? I did. I kept trying to be like, okay, I'm now going to be a psych major. I'm now going to do this. And every time, right, an amazing show would happen. People would offer me more money. That was nice. And I would say yes. Ooh, grad school. That's Beginner by Eric N. He's amazing. I think he was the dean when I was at Cal Arts of the theater school, I think. Siegel.
Yeah, I love this. This looks amazing.
It was this was that ceiling piece. They had water run down it and then drip off the back. And I had so much fun playing with how to light that. Right, I came in when we weren't in tech to be like, I wonder what happens if I put this color on the water. Because I was in grad school and had that kind of time.
So just a reminder, everyone, I see we got one question there. Well, Eddie will get to you, but just, throw those questions out there. Yeah. I see that you're no stranger to North Carolina, having designed at Playmakers Theater. But of all the shows you have ever designed across the country, what was your favorite show to design? And also, what was your favorite theater or city to work in?
Oof. The show, all right, I'll get to the show part, right? I'm gonna think a bunch on that one. Theaters, I'm gonna say 2, right? So Playmakers Rep has always been wonderful for me. It's really been a great place to grow as a lighting designer, and I've loved working with the students so much. And Dominic was the Emmy for all of my shows there, and so shout out to Dominic if you're watching. OSF, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I was a fellow there, and then I was lucky enough to get to design there 4 years later. It was such a huge space to be trusted with at that point in my career, that when people started telling me like they're going to offer you this, I was like, oh, you guys are cute. That's not going to happen for another 5-10 years, right? And then they did, and most of the team was still there from when I had been a fellow, and they were so supportive. Stephen Miller, Michael Mag, they were so wonderful to me, and still are, right? They still get a holiday card every year. Show is hard. All right, we're just gonna go with fun, right? Fun.
There you go. Yeah.
I did 12th Night on a rooftop in Brooklyn. I think like the year or maybe 2 years after I graduated grad school with a bunch of people I went to grad school with. That we basically did with like Home Depot lights. and a bunch of like someone had borrowed these from like the theater they worked at, but we kept getting like lightning storms on a metal roof. So as soon as we saw that, I would run around to like unplug all the power packs from everywhere and tarp all the lights. And I was also running a follow spot from like right from where the stairs came up to the roof, and like would tarp the light board. That was a lot of fun. It was a little busy, we'll say, but I had a lot of fun.
So we have a question from Eddie. Have you ever had problems with actors wanting you to change the lighting for them?
Yes. And that's why there's a stage manager. And I love my stage managers. And I refer those problems in, look, it's a stage manager, and look, it's a director. Right? But it depends on for what, right? If it's a safety issue, right, where it's literally like, I have to get off and I cannot see and I'm going to like fall off the stage, sure, right? Tell me that before you fall off the stage, please. But if it's like, I think I'd look better in a different pink, right? That's when I'm like, oh, look, director.
Yeah, I can certainly say, you know, my experience has been, you know, it's a collaborative art form, both the actors, designers, and the directors. And, you know, when there's trust in the room, I think it goes a long way. So if you could, Portia, could you tell us you know, we've got what do we have? We've got 52 people in attendance tonight, and I doubt all of them are actual lighting designers. So I know you spoke about what your typical day is and what a lighting designer means to you, but can you give us an insight as to, you know, what is the process of designing lights? Just, you know, quickly from, you know, script to the actual opening night. Like what is that look?
Well, I'll give you my process because we all do this differently, right? I read the script twice before I talk to the director. I try not to come up with any ideas until I talk to the director. Because frequently as a lighting designer, you get brought on after perhaps scenic and costume, and after there have been a few conceptual meetings. So in the beginning, it was hard for me because I would come up with all these ideas and then they'd be on, none of those are gonna work, right? Then I talk to the director a bunch, and then I do all the nitty gritty, right? Like I get the space drawings and I check heights and what is my inventory. Oh, look, it's the scenic design, like the final scenic designs are in. Okay, it's time to like start really plotting and list of ideas and all those things and trying to get those together. I'm still at the point where I get a prelim due date and a final due date. I appreciate that because whoever I'm handing that prelim into knows the space a lot better than I ever will, right? It's their space. They know things about it I will never understand, right? That like, oh, it says you can put a light here, but you can actually only fit a Fresnel. There's no way you can fit a source for this, right? Things I'm just never going to know, even if I visited the space, right? Because I'm generally, when I visit a space, they don't generally take me up into like, here's the catwalks and let's look through every single possible electric space, right? Fresnels are smaller than source force, right? So Fresnel, source force. So just spatial. And then, right, the ME or the production electrician sends it back to me with notes, hopefully like that being like, there is no way you will ever make this shot from there or any other things like that. Or, by the way, the inventory is off by 10 in one direction or another, just thought you should know, things like that. Then I go talk to the director and I take them through my ideas to make sure like we're on the same page, right? Because now you're in rehearsal, you're discovering things. I want to make sure there's enough air in my design that if I need to add something, I have enough, right? I have enough supplies to add what you need. Those are usually fine, right? I usually end up adding like 5 more specials after those conversations, right? Or like being like, I'll just add some Fresnels there and hope like I'll figure out what to do with them later. Then they fly me in. Generally, I'm in the position where I fly into a theater, right? Favorite is when they say I can go to the grocery store first before the designer run. So I know what I'll be eating that night. Designer run, I make lots of notes, right? I make lots of notes. Sometimes, Depending on how few cues there are, I might even start like doing cue numbers. But usually I just end up writing Q everywhere, and I go back later and write like approximate numbers for things and leave space and all those things. Because I came up in a time where calling point cues was really, really annoying. So I tend not to have point cues unless they're
By
followed.
point cue, can you explain what a point cue is?
Sure. So if you have a Q4 and a Q5, you can have a Q4.5 now. But sometimes, especially as you get into higher numbers, right, when it's like 367.5, that's a lot for a stage manager to have to say, right? And then probably with a sound cue or maybe with a projection cue with other things happening, and then the GO. So I tend to space out my numbers by fives in the beginning, because I don't want to have to renumber, right? That's a lot of work. I don't want to do more work than I have to. We get in, designer run, next day is usually focus, or maybe that night is focus. Next day we start tech. Sometimes I have a few hours in the morning of like, oh, look, they finished the scenic piece, you can light it now. Or they want you to start queuing. I know there's a trend to have all your cues in the board with all your queuing information in the board before you start. That has never worked for me. That has never been useful. It has always been a waste of time for me. So I don't bother. But in case y'all couldn't tell, I talk pretty fast. So that's not usually my issue during tech, right? I will talk very fast. We will get through the train of numbers. We'll all be good together, I promise. We tech, we continue to tech. The never-ending tech. I wish we'd abolish the 10 out of 12, but I'm still there. I don't leave, although I'd like to after 10 o'clock. Right, I just do. Right, I feel like my brain shuts off after like 12 hours in a space. My brain is just like, goodbye. We're gonna have to revisit to tomorrow anyhow. But we do that. We tech. We start showing it to people, right? Open dress, previews. The director gets notes from the artistic director. Those all come in. If I'm lucky, we're at the point of like little tweaks, right? Like little tweaks and little, adjustments. And I'm never actually done, right? Because I can always see like, if that shutter came in and that cut was at 30 degrees instead of the 20 it is now, that would be cleaner, right? I'm that person, right? I do it through even the last show I'm there for that I actually don't have notes after. I still will write myself like, now remember, if you're ever in this space again, right, you can't use this here. You need to do this at focus, right? All those sort of reminder notes. Some of them are also like, I call them my revelations notes, where sometimes it's about the people, where I'm like, remember, with this director, they are not going to tell you anything until the end of the day unless you chase them down during tech. So next time, start chasing them down earlier, because they will have notes for you, and you want those as soon as possible.
I think it's especially with lighting designers and sound designers, that conversation, that relationship between designer and director is so important to know, the type of personality that you're working with and how we work as a team. Let's see here.
Actually, during that first director conversation, I do a whole spiel to all my directors where I'm like, don't yell at me. Like, you can raise your voice so I can hear you if you're talking to me from the stage, but do not yell at me. It will not be good for you. It will not be good for me. It will not be good for the show.
So we have a question from Clara. Is there a certain type of lighting that is your favorite kind to work with or to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that means the fixture or if that's more like, maybe a show that you like you like musicals or dramas, operas.
Dance.
I miss dance. I haven't done dance in a long time. Last time I did dance was grad school. I love dance. I don't get to do it, but I do love it. I like things that are not necessarily reality based. I like getting to wander off. Yeah, I like to wander off into, and I went to Cal Arts. So yeah, I like to be a little bit like, can I get away with lighting this with one light? Let's see. Right? Like, let's see if I can get away. That's a lot of me in tech where I'm like, I'm just gonna leave this up and see if anyone says anything. No? No.
So, and so Claire, yeah, it sounds like Claire was interested in what is fun for you. So it sounds like roaming about and figuring it out. So Chase asks us, what are you doing research on? And that's really the bulk of the rest of our interview today. Your research series, Who Designs and Directs in LORT Theaters by Pronouns, covers a great deal of information over, you've done 5 reports over 5 years, yes? Well, before we get into that, can you explain to the attendees, what is a LORT theater? What does that mean?
Sure. So Chase, a LORT theater means it's a member of the League of Resident Theaters, which at any given time is somewhere between 69 and 77 theaters. They all band together to do collective bargaining agreements with the various unions. So in my case, that's USA 829, right, which is the union for theater designers, amongst other disciplines. There's SDC, which is stage directors and choreographers. And there's Actors Equity, which also includes stage managers. Right, so all those 76 theaters get together every 5 to whatever the term length of the contract is to come negotiate with the union side. It usually means they make some amount of money, right? They're not teeny tiny. They usually make, they make some amount of money. They're all over the country, but some regions or some sub-regions only have one. Versus in New York City, there's like, is it 5 now? Right, Roundabout, Manhattan Theater Club, Lincoln Center, Second Stage. I'm missing, maybe it's 4. It might be 4. But it's on their website, lort.org. They have a whole member, right? They have a map of all their members. But that's LORT.
Thank you.
So we'd love to have you go ahead and talk some about what your research is on and what got you started in your research.
So, I had a kid. Nobody seemed to figure out I had a kid for the first year she was alive. Although I was not keeping her a secret. Like, I know there are a bunch of like secret babies in theater, but I was not. I was pretty like, nope, having a kid. Nope, massively pregnant. I had my child right after a 10 out, like day after a 10 out of 12 when I should have been in another 10 out of 12. So yeah, it was not, I was not subtle. Yeah, it was good times. I had to go and be like, I'm sorry, I'm not coming in, I'm having a baby. Yeah, good times. So I have this child, I have all the shows, right, that I generally had in a year, and then she turned 1. And suddenly I was facing a season where I had gotten no inquiries, no offers, no even just like text message being like, hey, is there any chance you're free in this random month from now? So my daughter, I was lucky, she took 3-hour naps, which is great, except you really couldn't make any noise. You couldn't fold clothes, you couldn't wash dishes, you couldn't do things, otherwise she would wake up and you'd start the whole process again. But I figured out I could type very, very softly, right? I could manage that. And I had actually been wondering this question since I got out of undergrad in 2003, right? I'm like, okay, so who does actually design in LORT theater? Because I had interned at a LORT theater. So I knew what it was. I had interned in electrics for a season. And I was like, well, okay, how do people get to like actually design in these spaces? But in 2003, I couldn't figure out how to answer that question because the internet was not quite as comprehensive as it is now, right? So here we are, it's 2014, and I thought, okay, well, I'll answer this question for me, right? I'm curious, I wanna know, I have these 3 hours where I can't really do things that need to be done, so I will do this. And then I started getting the numbers. It's like, oh, they're so much worse than even I thought they would be. And now I have a responsibility to put this out into the world.
And what were those first numbers that you were gathering? Like, what were they directly on?
They were directly on, right? I would go to the theater's website, find the shows, find who they said were the designers, if at all possible. And then I would send to the theaters their, right, here's what I found. Can you confirm this or correct this or fill in what's missing?
Mhm.
And then I went through and found people's bios. Even in 2014, most designers already had bios out there, show bios on their own websites, speaking engagements they had done like this where, right, where their pronouns were used. Because designers get to, designers get to check their bios before they go into programs. It's part of the contract.
Mhm.
So I knew that. And that first year, because I have it, it was 71.8% to 28.2% he to she designers overall between the 9-10 to 13-14 seasons. So after over 5 seasons. But in lights, because I'm lights, it was only 13.7 she designers. And when I figured out that number, I thought it was in the 20s, right? Given that I had been mentored by women designers, I was a woman lighting designer, right? There were lots of women lighting designers in grad programs, right? But when I saw that it was so low, I realized it wasn't going to be like, oh, maybe this is a thing I put on my Facebook. I realized it was going to have to be bigger.
And it certainly is. I mean, like, so right now we pulled a lot of the information from looking at what is it, 80, a 90 something page report that you put together. One of the screenshots I'm going to share with everyone. But here is who designs and LORT theaters by programs, positions, and people. Can you speak a bit about this particular graph? And I hope you can see it. You can see it, yeah?
Yeah, this is the one from the 2019 article. So this is looking at 12-13 to 17-18, and I got rid of the data from 9-10 to 11-12 because what happened in those years, right, is projections was still becoming more of a known discipline. And lots of theaters I had talked to told me that they had projection or video designers, but they weren't credited, right? So there was nowhere to find a credit for them. In some cases, it was like the assistant stage manager or the assistant scenic designer. And I thought it was not quite ethical to credit where, like, if anybody ever went to look for it, they couldn't find this person. Right, so I eliminated those earlier years of the study and then went forth with 12-13. This graphic has gone a little awry, but I think it might just be my screen. We'll just say it's screen, it's fine. So these are the numbers overall, 6 seasons. The top part is in positions, right? Like there was a show, if there was a show and there was a scenic designer on it, they're in this, you guys can't see my, like I'm doing this with the mouse, you guys can't see that, but pretend you can see me pointing at this first scenic circle. That was funny. The bottom one is what I'm thinking of as a way to look at the pool. Like this is every designer who designed even a quarter of a LORT show, because I do divide positions, but I don't divide people when it comes to these things, over all 6 seasons. So in all 6 seasons, there were 517 scenic designers total, and that's that breakdown there between she, her. You'll notice there's where there was anyone using they, them, or their pronouns, that's there, even if it's less than 0.1%. You can see the only discipline that doesn't have anyone using those over those years that I found so far is in scenic. Make sense?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So one thing that I noticed while going through your research is that video and projections and sound designers have the lowest percentage of she designers of all of the disciplines. And in fact, sound design has actually gone down as far as percentage of positions goes, which is on page 23 of this document, if anybody has it up right now and is interested in looking at it. Do you have any thoughts on why this is?
So here's the thing about sound, right? Sound has, and this is anecdotal, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, if that makes sense. Sound has the greatest number of resident designers, right? That frequently you have a resident sound designer / sound engineer in more theaters. And frequently those positions go to men. So part of that is that it's not, it is much more rare to find, for instance, a resident lighting designer. So frequently you have seasons where it's like, oh, there were 6 positions and then were maybe 5 designers who did those 6 positions. Versus in sound, those same 6 positions are all done by the same person, right? With maybe one of them being done by a freelance hire, right? So that my theory on sound is it's part of the resident designer thing.
Gotcha. And so we have an anonymous attendee asking the question, and I know that you have done some internships unpaid, as many of us in this field have done. Do you have any ideas on how to increase diversity in design, especially since we are in an industry that leverages the use of unpaid or underpaid internships?
Oh, I have so many ideas. So I think we should get rid of unpaid internships. I think most of them are illegal to begin with, and should be shut down accordingly. I think most unpaid internships in general should be paid at, right, an entry-level wage, and are frequently used as entry wage labor. Like there's supposed to be a giant component that's learning, that actually having an intern there is supposed to take more of your time, right? To teach that person what they need to know. That doesn't happen a lot of the time. You're just expected to know it. And if you don't know, you better catch up fast. Speaking from my experience with not every internship fellowship I did, but, right? But with at least one I'm thinking of offhand. So, diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of my work, right, in all my spheres, right, is saying over and over and over again to people that the people you're looking for already exist. Because what happens frequently is people go, it's a pipeline problem. So we're going to get those elementary school students interested in theater design, and then in 20 years we'll have solved the problem just magically. And I'm like, no. This is not the Olympic gymnastics team, right? Where like, if you want to start doing gymnastics by the time you're 4 or 5 or 6, you're probably not going to make the Olympic gymnastic team at 12. This is theater design. You do not need to discover it at 9 years old to be a great theater designer in your 20s. You can discover it in your 20s and still be a great theater designer, right? But these people already exist, and it's you know, now there are lists, right? There are lists of theater designers of color and theater technicians of color. That's Megan Sandberg-Zakian's list, in case anybody's writing that down. And David Stewart, has his list of theater designers of color who have worked in regional theater already. So these lists exist, but it's also trying to point out to people that like, there were a couple of years there, right? Post the first year of study and pre now, where I only designed in February. Literally, I had like 3 seasons where I was like, look, I designed in February and I don't design the rest of the year. I only do the diversity show, right? I do the diversity slide. And trying to convince people that I could do other plays. Not that, trust me, I love plays about race and social justice, right? They're a huge part of my heart. But, you know, sometimes it's nice to do a last 5 years, right? Where like, that's not a central theme of that particular show. And I got to do it with Kevin Free last year, sometime recently, and that was fun for me. So I think it's also going to take some people giving up some stuff, right? To tell you the truth. Like, I have people's numbers, and sometimes some of those folks write me and are like, "You're ruining my career," and I'm like, "You did 13 shows last season. You did 12 this season. Sit down." Right? Like, I don't have time for that. One less show, right? Particularly when these people have other forms of employment, aka they're professors, right? I'm a little bit like, oh, right, like, share, right? And to theaters, I go, okay, just because you have always had every lighting designer for the last 3 decades has been a Tony winner, maybe you could have someone else. It could happen. Right? I want theaters to take responsibility for who they hire on the design side. And I think frequently, because designers aren't seen, right? We're not at the talkback. We don't have our pictures in the paper. We're not on the poster, certainly, right? Maybe our names are, but like our faces are not. I think sometimes the equity, diversity, inclusion, access, belonging conversation in theater slides past designers, where it goes like, oh, but you could just do research. And you're like, no, 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 no. There's something to lived experience, right? And people frequently say to me when I say that, where they're like, well, then, like white designers get to do all the white shows and designers color, do all the designer color shows, right? Do all the people of color shows. And I'm like, okay. But what is considered the classical canon is all done as white folk shows, right? So that means if we follow that logic, you've already eliminated like 90% of the shows in the system, right? Versus the other way around, it's like, look, there's only 10% here, right? Do I hope it's more? Do I hope it gets to be more? Am I making up some of these numbers a little bit? But I'm not so sure I'm wrong. Yeah, all that's true. Not the numbers in the study, but the numbers I just said. Right, those are all true because I've checked the math too many times. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, I mean, no, thank you very much.
Sorry.
I mean,
Towards a pipeline rant. It just
yeah,
happened.
no, I get it. And then, honestly, the question is, can't be, we don't expect you to come up with the answer to that question because it's a huge, it's much bigger than us. So, yeah.
Awesome. So when talking about sound designers, you mentioned that having staff designers design full seasons skews those numbers a bit. And in trying to hire designers that we're not, that we haven't already worked with before to solve this, this issue of bringing people in and reaching pronoun parity, do you think that staff positions should be limited, should be changed? Do you think that they have a negative effect overall on this parity?
I think you can adapt staff positions, right? Like, my hope is actually for those places that like, no, we need a resident sound engineer and we need this designer because they've done Christmas Carol with us for the last decade. I'm not telling you to kick that person out the door, right? Like, they devoted their lives to you. But I'm hoping in some of those situations that you can hire a designer who perhaps doesn't have that level of experience yet and tell the resident sound engineer, this person is going to might need more support. They might need more from you than perhaps another designer might. So it turns into almost a little bit of a mentoring situation. Then it is like, oh, well, it's not my show, right? Like, oh, look, it's a door, right? Because to an extent, that's the issue of gap training, right? That like, you might have all the skills you need. I don't know that much about sound, right? Let's just say that. I am not a sound designer. That's on purpose. That wasn't an accident, right? So maybe I'll make a lighting metaphor and y'all can try to apply it to sound, right? I know the first time I did outdoor theater, right? Although I had done tons of shows, I was suddenly like, there's the sun, right? It's June. The sun is still up during the first act, right? And I was lucky enough that Michael Mag very kindly led me through like, okay, Portia. So when it starts, right, like, so when this, later in the season, when it starts getting darker earlier, here's what we're going to do to make sure your lights stay the same. But I had no idea how to approach that question. I just kept staring at the sun being like, I don't need to turn anything on. The sun, right? Like the sun is on.
I beat this, yeah.
Right? Like, what do I do? But Michael Mag was so kind to be like, okay, here's how we're going to approach this. Because I just sat there being like, because, you know, we had done some pre-queuing, but it was like midnight and it was dark. So then suddenly there were actors on stage and I was like, are my lights on? And they're like, yeah, Portia, we're in 210. And I'm like, I see.
No, we're not.
Right? I literally see nothing. So I'm hoping perhaps in sound design that can be part of the resident sound engineer, sound designer's role in that case, right? That they're, you know, because I'm sure there are things specific to people's spaces too, right? That no matter how many shows you do, like I just walked into my last show and, oh, the grid is at an angle. And I was like, huh, that's a big angle. Right? Like that pipe is at 8'6" and that's at 17'6". And like there are pipes that go this way, they're at the height, and then there are angled pipes. Right? So it's like, okay, how many lights can I hang at this angle before it will hit the right? And then even in that case, there was a very nice you know, master electrician who was like, okay, you can fit 2 here. Right? Hi Lydia. I don't know who you are, but I thought I'd say hello.
Hi, Lydia. We're gonna just I'm just gonna make that. There we go. Goodbye.
It's all good.
Well, Lydia's joined us here. Lydia, thank you for joining us. We got about 15 minutes left, and we got quite a few questions here from the group, and they're all lighting. So we're gonna shift back to lighting and ask you this question. Miles asked, "Do you have a favorite fixture, conventional and intelligent?"
Miles, I am an old-fashioned girl. I have a soft spot in my heart for that 500-watt Fresnel.
So, and tell us real quick, when we say conventional versus intelligent, what does that mean?
Intelligent generally means it moves, it changes color sometimes by itself. It sometimes does shutters by itself. It does lots of things. But I say, in the vast majority of my work, I have not had a moving fixture. As a designer, as an associate, there were always movers to handle.
So I would love to ask you about one of my personal favorite shows that you happened to work on and happened to do moving light tracking on, which was Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. So for someone who does prefer conventionals, how was doing moving light tracking on one of the most expensive and highly technical shows on Broadway in the last ever?
So Spider-Man, oh, that's not true. They never gave me that credit. Sorry, I was not the assistant lighting designer I was literally the moving light tracker. I think if you had to be fancy, it was like assistant to lighting designer. So my mentor from grad school, Don Holder, lit this. Right? And I should say the associate is Vivian Leone. The assistants included Caroline Chow, who's no longer with us. And the programmer who I tracked is Richie Tyndall. So my mentor asked if I would be on this show, and I was like, ooh, a Broadway show, right? Sure. So I moved to New York. I found an apartment. I was all proud of myself. Like, look at me, I'm living the lighting design life. And then Spider-Man got postponed for a year. So that was different. But Spider-Man, we ended up with something like 158 moving lights. And because it was going to be so many moving lights, Don very graciously had Carolyn Wong, one of his other associates, come teach me FileMaker. Because I had never touched FileMaker before. So she came for a whole week right at the beginning to teach me FileMaker so I could keep up. In many ways, it very much prepared me for the study because it's a ton of data entry, right? And paying attention. In many ways, I felt protected on that show because there was a lot of, I feel like there was a lot of drama going on in the orchestra, right? Where all the other tech tables were, but it was just me and Richie for the most part in the balcony. And we had a great time. We made up songs, right? I love Richie. He also gets a holiday card every year, right? Like, we made a song. We were with each other for 10 months, like 6 days a week for 10 months, right? Reteching a show, because of course we reteched. It taught me a lot about how to, because I had always been that kind of kid who was like, I love tech because it's like a week and a half, right? And then I would crash. But when you're in tech for 10 months, more or less, like, you can't gear up the same way because it's just impossible to sustain. So it taught me a lot about what I needed to do to keep myself sane, which included joining a volleyball league.
Hey.
An adult volleyball league that I would run off to in between the shows on Saturdays. In case you're all wondering. And I would go play volleyball. Adult recreational. This was not like fancy volleyball. Right, like in like the bottom of the league. Like, look, you're like level 10 of 10 levels. But it was still fun, and I enjoyed it.
And Faith asks, this is not necessarily a segue, but what's the hardest show you have ever done?
They're all hard. Hardest show I've ever done as a designer. There's been so many different challenges, which is part of what I love about lighting design, right? That sometimes it's a technical challenge, like, oh, the grid's at an angle. And sometimes it's, oh, you are brought onto this show after all, like, most of the things have been done because the lighting designer has dropped out or something unfortunate has happened. That's a whole different situation to walk into. There are also those places where, like, there is something going on here, but you don't actually know because that's, right, because this is not your home, right? But, like, the master electrician is pissed at the props master, and the stage manager screaming at everybody, and you're not sure why any of that is happening, right? And you sort of want to be like, I'm just here to light the show, right? Like, please don't drag me into your drama. Hardest. I mean, they're all hard. You know, because inevitably, if something is easy in one way, right? Like, oh, I love everybody, right? Like, love everybody I'm working with. This is great. Then the show is incredibly technically challenging. Or if the show is like, it's okay. There's like 40 cues in 90 minutes, right? Like, it's pretty, right? Like, look, it's the cue. Then, right? Then there is like, there's personality things happening, and there's things that pop up that that I still, after, I don't know, 18 years, something like that, I still never expect. Like one theater being like, you don't have a monitor, which is what you get to see the same screen as the board is out in the house, when the student assistant is not here, because they have the dongle. You need to do that. Do you have a dongle? And me being like, no? And then being like, you don't carry this dongle with you? And I'm like, no. Do I carry a $600 dongle around with me? No. And they're like, well, did you ever think of getting one? No. Right? Nobody has ever asked me to bring my own things to make sure I have a monitor. Right? In the same way, some people are like, do you bring your own little light? Which is the little light we have at Tech, that little small light, right? That you can dim, right? So you can see things properly. No. Right? People give me those, right? People let me have those things while I'm here, and then I run away and they keep the thing. That's not really an answer to your question, but I'm not sure I actually have it.
They're all fun and they're all hard. How's that? That's what I get.
Yeah.
There you go.
So speaking of all of those different things that you expect from different places, did you travel often to go to different theaters before COVID?
Often is relative. I felt like it was often, right? I feel like I traveled a lot more pre-having Lucy, right? But then again, I was in New York City, so a lot of that was like interborough travel, right? Where it's like, it's not the same thing. I do something between 2 and 3 shows a year, right? Where I run, because then that's basically me leaving my home for 2 weeks. Or in one case, like I did my first real off-Broadway show last fall, And even though it was in New York City, so I could technically commute, it still felt like I was gone for 3.5 weeks.
And so now that we're coming up to the end of the hour, Alec asks, and this will lead into our final question tonight. What his question is, what is the essential quality that makes you a successful lighting specialist? And I'll add to that, what would you, Portia, say to young students, young artists who want to become lighting designers? What's the one piece of advice you would give?
Essential quality. Intentional adaptation. Right? You have to be able to change, but you've got to do it with a reason. And you've got to be able to say that reason, because a lot of people will ask you why you're changing something, right? Because generally, lighting designers, at least at a certain level of theater, right? I'm not going up and changing the gel in the light. Sometimes I do because I can't help myself and I want it done faster. I'm not really supposed to.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that. So.
He's never done that, ever.
Right. Nice. Advice. Right. We have no idea what's happening next. Nobody does. Right. Do not believe anybody who tells you they know exactly what the theater industry will look like when we come back or come forward or whatever people are saying about it. So I know a lot of people are like, we should tell the youngins they need to take courses and all these things. And I'm like, do we even know if any of those, right? Like, are we so sure those are going to be the things they need to know right now? Right? I would say to you that you can always be more than one thing. Our industry will constantly try to push you into being like, this is your little tiny, teeny corner of it. That does not mean you don't have other skills and that you shouldn't be valued for those. If you had told me coming out of grad school that it's roughly 10 years later, I would be known more as a researcher than a lighting designer, I would have laughed so hard at you. Going, what would I research? How would I know how to do research? I was a theater major and now I'm a lighting design grad student, right? But the fact is, if you have a question, there's no reason you can't be the one to answer it, right? You have the skills you need because you have the curiosity already, and you can build those other skills. I know a lot of people want assistants, rising designers to come out with all the skills they could possibly need. But the fact is, a lot of those you have to learn in the space, in the theater, right? I had done a lot of assisting as a grad student, right? And in between, right, undergrad and grad. And then when I got out in the world, I was like, oh, wait, with this designer, I need to do this differently. And it's not because the way I used to do it was wrong. It's because that's what this designer needs from me right now. Right? So it's not a failure. It's not like a failure on your teacher's part. Like they didn't teach you every single way you could possibly assist every single human being in the world. Right? But it's knowing that there's no one right way. Right?
Well, I love that intentional adaptation. I love that. That's great.
Adrienne Marie Brown, emergent strategy. Let's just credit her, right? Okay. That's one of the elements.
Awesome. So, Portia, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. Darby, thank you so much for being part of this as well. I hope everyone enjoyed tonight's conversation. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to email me directly. That's jreeve2@ncsu.edu. Find us on the website. I'll be glad to pass along any questions I can to Portia, and if she has time, I think she'll, engage. But if not, I'm sure we can help you out. Sorry, I just volunteered you for a little Q&A afterwards. So yeah, thank you so much, Portia. I hope you have a great night, and again, thank you for everything.
Sure. Thank you all for coming out there. And thank you.
Take care, everybody.